I hadn't stepped foot in that house in almost 8 years. Not for birthdays, not for holidays, not even for the family barbecue my father begged me to attend the year before he died. But when the lawyer called, calm, flat-voiced, saying, "You're listed in the will, Ms. Carter," I went. Not because I wanted the money, not because I thought he had left me anything, but because deep down, I hoped he'd remembered me, hoped he'd seen me in the end. The house looked the same. Fake flowers on the porch, rusted wind chimes, the front door still stuck on the bottom corner. You had to kick it open just right. Inside, it was a curated museum of my father's second life. Family photos with her, my stepmother, Diane, matching Christmas pajamas, smiling grandchildren I'd never met, my two half-brothers, Thomas and Eli, sitting stiffly on the velvet couch like they'd been coached on how to look properly heartbroken. I took a seat in the back, not really belonging anywhere. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began reading. The room was silent, reverent even, as he listed everything. To Diane, the house, 2 cars, and my father's pension. To Thomas and Eli, stock portfolios, savings accounts, and the lake house in Vermont. My name came last. I sat up a little. The lawyer cleared his throat. To my daughter, Julia Carter, I leave $1, with a note that reads, "Be grateful." I swear I heard someone choke on a laugh. No one looked at me. I just stared at the lawyer, blinking slowly, waiting for him to correct himself, to say there was a second envelope, a private message, a joke, a misunderstanding, but he didn't. That was it. $1 and 2 words. Be grateful. I didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't speak. I just stood up, walked out, and didn't say goodbye. But inside, something broke, and something else started burning. Because that day, I didn't just lose a father, I lost the last piece of the illusion I'd spent my whole life trying to keep intact. I didn't even look at the dollar right away. It was folded neatly in a white envelope, handed to me as I was walking out of the lawyer's office. He didn't make eye contact. He didn't say sorry. Just handed me the envelope like it was a receipt. I got into my car, shut the door, and sat there for a long time. Engine off, radio silent, hands trembling just enough to notice. Then I opened it, and there it was, one single dollar bill, crisp, uncirculated, and a note, typed on plain white paper. No signature, no date, just 4 words. Be grateful. Dad. I stared at it like it might change. Like maybe if I looked long enough, the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. Be grateful. For what? For being excluded. For being forgotten. For getting a single dollar when the rest of the family walked away with houses, cars, vacations, and framed photos of a life I was never part of. It wasn't even the amount that hurt. It was the message behind it. The coldness. The finality. The fact that after all these years of silence, that was what he thought I deserved. A platitude and a coin toss. I'd spent most of my life thinking maybe he didn't know how to show love, that maybe he was awkward, reserved, raised in a generation that didn't talk about feelings. But that note, that wasn't awkward, that wasn't distant, that was deliberate. It was meant to sting. And the worst part, it worked. I sat in that car, staring at that dollar, feeling every ounce of childhood pain crawl back up my spine like it never left. The Christmas mornings, I waited for a phone call that never came. The birthdays, with generic gift cards and no "Love Dad" in the card. The high school graduation, where he clapped politely but left before dinner. All of it. Be grateful. I folded the note slowly, like it might shatter if I moved too fast, and slipped it back into the envelope. But something inside me had already split. And the more I thought about it, the more I knew. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of one. I wish I could say I walked out of that house with my head held high. But I didn't. I paused in the doorway, just for a second, and looked back at the people still sitting in that living room. The family I was born into. Diane, my father's second wife. sat perched at the edge of her chair like she was auditioning for sympathy. Perfect hair, funeral-appropriate pearls, no tear tracks, just calculation. Next to her, Thomas leaned back, arms crossed, already smirking like he'd won something. His suit looked expensive, tailored just enough to let you know he'd been waiting for this moment. Eli looked guilty, not sad, not remorseful, just like a kid who knew the grown-ups had done something wrong and didn't have the courage to stop it. None of them met my eyes, not one. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't some administrative accident. This wasn't a legal loophole. This was intentional. They'd known. They'd read that will already, probably more than once. They knew my name was tacked on, at the end, like a footnote, like an afterthought. They knew I wasn't getting anything. And still, they sat there smiling, sipping coffee, waiting for their slice. And then there was the lawyer, Mr. Halpern. He looked older than I remembered, thinner, more tired. He'd handled my dad's business for over 20 years. He knew everything. When he handed me the envelope with the dollar, he did it quietly. No eye contact, no comfort, just obligation. As I stood there, I wondered, did they all talk about it beforehand? Did they laugh? Did Diane suggest the "be grateful" line? Because it sounded like her, performative, cruel, in that passive-aggressive way only a woman like her could manage. I wanted to scream, not because of the money, but because of the message underneath it all. You don't belong here anymore. But they were wrong. I may not have gotten the house, or the lake cabin, or the pension checks, but I got something else, a reason. A reason to dig deeper, to ask the questions no one wanted answered, to uncover the version of my father they never expected me to find. And I promise you, the moment I stepped outside, into the cold sunlight of that driveway, I swore, they may have written me out of the will, but I was about to write myself back into the story. It's easy to assume I was the problem. After all, I'm the daughter who left, the one who didn't come home for holidays, the one who didn't send birthday cards, the one who wasn't there when Dad got sick. But that's not the whole story. You don't just drift from your family one day, you get pushed. Growing up, my mom and I were close. Too close, according to Dad. She was warm, loud, affectionate, a painter with paint-stained fingers and a laugh that could wake the whole neighborhood. When she got sick, I was 12. When she passed, I was 13. And something inside my father changed the moment she left this world. He stopped hugging me, stopped asking how school was, stopped seeing me at all. Grief turned him into a stranger, and that stranger remarried within a year. Diane was the kind of woman who liked things her way, clean, controlled, performative. She called me sweetheart, with a smile that never reached her eyes. She rearranged my room when I wasn't home. She threw out my mom's old paintings, saying they were too depressing. Then came Thomas and Eli, perfect little family, Christmas photos, matching outfits, a fridge full of report cards, and world's best dad mugs that made me feel like a ghost in my own house. When I left for college, I never really came back. Dad said he was proud of me, but he never visited, never helped with tuition, never even asked what I was studying. Meanwhile, Diane was posting Facebook albums labeled Our Family, without a single photo of me. By the time I turned 25, I'd accepted it. I was the footnote, the leftover, the chapter he didn't want to reread. So no, I didn't leave to be dramatic. I left because I was already gone. And still, some part of me hoped that deep down, he'd remember. That maybe when he sat down to write that will, he'd think of the little girl with paint on her hands, begging him not to throw away her mother's canvases. But he didn't. He left me $1 and a note that said, "Be grateful." And now I was starting to wonder, was that meant to punish me or protect me? I was the first to leave. Not just the house, the whole story. I moved out 2 weeks after my high school graduation, took a bus to a city I'd only seen in movies, with 2 suitcases and a scholarship I'd fought tooth and nail for. I didn't say goodbye the way people expect you to. I didn't cry in the driveway, didn't take one last look at the porch light or the crooked mailbox. I just left. Because by then, I'd already spent years feeling like a guest in my own home, like I was borrowing space in someone else's life. At college, I didn't talk about my family much. When people asked, I said things like, "We're not that close," or "It's complicated." It was easier than explaining that I was the invisible thread no one missed when it snapped. I sent one postcard freshman year, just one. It said, "Hope you're well, doing okay here." Dad never replied. I thought maybe he'd call, ask how classes were going, tell me he saw the note, but he didn't. And after that, I stopped sending anything. I built a new life, one made of late-night library sessions, friends who became my chosen family, ramen dinners, and laughter that didn't have to be quiet. I got a job after graduation, then a better one. I paid off loans, signed a lease, bought my first used car. And no, he didn't help with that either. And every now and then, I'd get a wedding invitation or a family photo from someone back home. Thomas graduating, Eli's engagement, Diane smiling like she won. I'd look at those photos and feel nothing. Just a strange, hollow sort of curiosity, like I was watching characters in a show I used to be part of, before they rewrote my role out of the script. And yet, when the lawyer called after Dad died, I went. I packed a bag, took the day off work, put on a black dress I hadn't worn in years. Because deep down, that little sliver of hope, the one I'd buried under logic and boundaries, and I don't care anymore, it still flickered. Maybe I'd mattered to him more than he let on. Maybe there'd be a letter, an apology, a "you were never forgotten." Instead, there was $1 and a note that said, "Be grateful." And honestly, at that point, I was grateful. But not for him. I was grateful I left when I did, because if I'd stayed, I think I would have disappeared. After the will was read, the real celebration began. Just not for me. The day after, Diane hosted a casual brunch at the house. I saw it on Thomas's Instagram story. Eggs Benedict, mimosas, someone playing the piano in the background. The caption read, "Celebrating Dad's legacy. We're so honored." Honored, that word made my jaw clench. Because here's what they got. Diane got the house, a 2-story colonial in the nicest part of town, fully paid off. She also got both cars, the one she drove and the one Dad kept in the garage for special occasions. She got access to his pension, monthly deposits, automatic and clean. Thomas and Eli, they each got sizable trust funds. Thomas got the lake house, Eli got the apartment in the city, and the remaining shares of Dad's business. A tidy little 6-figure inheritance, tied up in neat legal bows. And what did I get? A folded dollar, and a note that said, "Be grateful." No trust, no heirlooms, no photos, no explanation, not even the childhood box I kept under the stairs. The one filled with art from my mom, the letters I wrote when I was little, the shoebox of birthday cards I never opened. I didn't get a single thing that said, "You mattered." It wasn't about the money. God knows I never expected it. It was about the message that I had been erased, that even in death, he wanted to make sure I felt small. I imagined Diane sipping her mimosa, laughing at something Thomas said, while I sat in my car outside my apartment, watching the story unfold on my cracked phone screen. And for the first time in a long time, I felt rage. Not the loud kind, the cold, calculated kind. Because maybe I couldn't go back in time and make him love me, but I could find out what he was hiding. Because no one leaves behind a single dollar and a sentence like that without there being more. And I was going to find it, no matter how buried it was. It wasn't the dollar. It wasn't the house, the lake cabin, the trust funds, the wine glasses they toasted him with, or the matching black clothes they wore like costumes. What hurt more than all of that was knowing that he died, thinking I didn't deserve anything. No letter, no final words, no moment of acknowledgement. Just that note. Be grateful. As if I should be thankful he remembered me at all. As if that single dollar was some kind of charity. not a final slap across the face. And maybe I would have brushed it off if it came from anyone else. But this was my father, the man who used to hold my hand crossing the street, the man who taught me how to ride a bike, the man who packed my lunch the day after my mom's funeral because I refused to eat cafeteria food. That man was in there, somewhere, wasn't he? Or maybe I just kept him alive in my memory, so I didn't have to face the reality that once Diane entered the picture, he never really looked back. What hurt most wasn't the lack of money. It was the complete and total absence of regret. He had time. He'd been sick for months, plenty of time to write, to call, to set things straight. And he chose not to. He chose silence. He chose exclusion. That note wasn't an oversight. It was a message, a final deliberate decision to remind me where I stood in the family he rebuilt without me. And still, a tiny part of me wondered, was there something I missed? Because people don't just leave $1 and a vague message unless there's more under the surface. Something hidden, something unsaid, something buried deep that the rest of them didn't want me to find. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every word of that will in my mind. What he said, what he didn't, the weight of what was left out. I pulled the dollar back out from the envelope and stared at it again. I turned the note over, looking for hidden ink like some movie detective. Nothing, but still, I knew there was more to this story. And I was done sitting quietly outside of it. 3 days after the will reading, I got a text from Diane, of all people. "Hi Julia, if you want, you can come pick up your boxes from the garage. Just some old stuff of yours. We'll be clearing things out this weekend." No greeting, no condolences, just logistics. I stared at the message for a full minute before responding. "I'll come tomorrow, don't touch anything." She didn't reply. The next afternoon, I pulled up to the house I once called home. The lawn was freshly trimmed. Thomas's car was in the driveway. Through the window, I could see Eli stacking books into cardboard boxes, already dividing what wasn't his. I walked in without knocking. Diane greeted me with the same expression she always wore. Polite, stretched tight across her face, like it might crack if she smiled too hard. "Your things are in the garage," she said. "Back left corner," like I was a delivery person. I didn't answer, just walked past her, through the kitchen that still had the same ugly fruit wallpaper, and into the garage. It was cold, dusty, smelled like old paint and rust. There were 2 boxes, one labeled Julia, Old School. The other just said MISC. I knelt down, opened the first one. Old notebooks, a worn-out hoodie, a few of Mom's postcards she used to slip into my lunchbox. I picked up one and ran my thumb over the handwriting. She always drew little suns next to my name. For a second, I almost forgot why I was there. Then I opened the second box. At first glance, it was nothing. Loose paper, tangled cords, a broken music box. But under that, taped to the side of the box wall, was something strange. A small manila envelope, no label, sealed. I looked around. The garage door was open, and the house felt quiet. No one was watching. I peeled the flap back carefully. Inside was a key and a sticky note with 2 words, Unit 237B. That was it. No name, no address, no explanation. But I recognized the handwriting. It was his, my dad's, sharp, angular, the kind he used on holiday tags and tax forms. And suddenly I wasn't angry anymore. I was curious, alert, alive. Because for the first time since the will was read, I had something the rest of them didn't. A lead. Something secret. Something buried. Something he didn't trust them with. Whatever Unit 237B was, it was meant for me. I was halfway out the door with the boxes when something made me stop. It wasn't a sound, or a voice, or some dramatic flash of intuition. It was a feeling, a heaviness in my chest, like there was something else in that house pulling at me. So instead of heading straight for the car, I turned around and walked back inside. Diane had disappeared, probably upstairs, probably pretending I didn't exist. Thomas and Eli were still busy dividing Dad's books and pretending I wasn't there either. I took the hallway all the way down to the linen closet, opened the narrow door, stared up. The attic latch was still there. We hadn't gone up there in years. Not since I was maybe 10, when my dad had lifted me up on his shoulders so I could push the panel and climb into the dust and shadows. I pulled down the ladder. It creaked. Of course it did. And with every step I climbed, the air got thicker, warmer, like it was holding its breath. The attic was dark, but not empty. Stacks of boxes, old furniture under sheets, spiderwebs in every corner. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew there was something. Then I saw it. Tucked behind a broken lamp and a pile of rolled-up rugs. A wooden chest, small, worn, locked. But the moment I saw it, I remembered the envelope from the garage. I pulled it out from my bag, opened it, took out the key. It slid into the lock like it had been waiting all this time. Click, inside, letters, dozens of them. Some were addressed to me, some to no one, some just marked by dates. I pulled one out, the top corner yellowed and soft. Julia, I don't know if I'll ever send this, but I hope one day you'll read it. I wasn't good at fatherhood after your mother died. I didn't know how to love you without her. And instead of trying, I shut you out. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. My hands shook. I reached for another. I heard you got into NYU. I didn't tell you, but I was proud. You've always been stronger than me. And another. Diane didn't want you in the will. She thought it would complicate things. But I left something that only you can find. I stopped breathing. The key, the unit, this chest. It wasn't punishment, it was protection. He hadn't forgotten me. He'd just hidden the truth where only I could find it. 2 days later, I found it. Unit 237B, tucked behind a chain-link fence at a storage facility 30 minutes outside town. The kind of place with faded signage, creaky gates, and one tired guy in the front office who didn't ask questions. I handed him the key. He slid a clipboard across the counter. Your name? Julia Carter. He checked the records, nodded. That unit's been prepaid, years in advance. You're listed as the sole authorized access. I felt my heart skip. Prepaid, in my name. This wasn't a backup plan. It was intentional. He handed me a flashlight. Lights are busted in that row. And I walked down a narrow corridor lined with rusted roll-up doors, the number plates crooked or peeling. And then I saw it. 237B. I slipped the key into the lock, turned it. Click. The door groaned as I rolled it up. Dust rose like a wave. The air was heavy with that unmistakable storage smell. Cardboard, old fabric, forgotten years. But the space? It wasn't junk. It was carefully arranged. A desk, a filing cabinet, 3 sealed crates, and in the corner, a safe bolted to the floor. I stepped inside, suddenly unsure where to start. I chose the desk. Inside the drawers, old photographs, some of me and my mom, ones I'd never seen before, copies of letters, the same ones I found in the attic, but here they were printed neatly, organized by year. A flash drive labeled simply, JC, read me. I pocketed it. Next, the filing cabinet, rows of manila folders, each labeled with things like trust, contingent, asset transfers, Julia, correspondence, legal objections, Diane. Wait, legal objections. I pulled that one out, flipped it open. Emails, dozens. From Diane, from her attorney, from the family lawyer. Letters urging my father to remove me from the will, saying I'd been gone too long, that, including her, will only complicate things, that Julia doesn't need it, she's fine on her own. And then his responses, short, measured, firm. Julia gets something, even if it's not what they expect. Protect what I've set up. She's earned more than they'll ever understand. And suddenly, I got it. The dollar wasn't the insult, it was the shield. He had to make it look like I got nothing, so they'd leave me alone, so they wouldn't contest what he really left behind. This unit, this paper trail, this hidden legacy, this was my inheritance. I didn't leave the storage unit for hours. I sat cross-legged on the cold concrete floor, surrounded by folders, photos, and 100 pieces of a man I thought I'd lost. But the most powerful thing in that space, the letters, not the legal documents, not the financials, not even the safe, though I knew I'd open that too, eventually. It was the handwritten words, on lined paper, yellowed with time, some torn from journals, some scrawled on hotel stationery, some dated back almost 15 years, and every one of them was addressed to me. You were 9 the last time I took you to the zoo. You held my hand so tight. I don't remember the animals, just the way you looked at me, like I was the only safe thing in the world. Your mom would have been proud of who you're becoming. I wish I'd told you that when it mattered. Diane thinks silence is peace, but silence is just a weapon we pretend is gentle. I sat there reading until the words blurred. He never sent these, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to bridge the space between us. Not after everything. He'd boxed up his guilt, his love, his regret, and placed it all here, in a hidden corner of the world, waiting for a moment he wasn't brave enough to face in life. And yet, these letters, they said what he never could. That I did matter, that I wasn't forgotten, that he loved me, even if too late, even if from afar. There was one letter tucked at the very bottom. Different paper, thicker, no date. I unfolded it carefully. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And they probably think they won. But this is yours, Julia, all of it. The words, the truth, the record of who we really were. You weren't erased. You were protected. And maybe I didn't know how to love you the right way, but I never stopped trying. I pressed the page to my chest and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a footnote. I felt like a daughter. I kept asking myself the same question over and over again. Why the dollar? Why not just nothing at all? Why not seal the storage unit and let it sit in silence? Why risk leaving a trail at all? It wasn't until I went back and reread one of the typed letters, buried deep in the trust contingent folder, that it finally clicked. It was dated about a year before he died, addressed to his estate attorney. Subject line, Alternative Estate Distribution Strategy. In it, he wrote, I want Julia to inherit what matters, but not through the official channels. If I list her publicly, they'll fight it. They'll accuse her of manipulation. They'll drag her through court just to prove a point. I know my family. I've seen how they treat her. $1 is symbolic. It legally acknowledges her without triggering their suspicion. The rest, she'll find if she chooses to look. That's when I understood. The dollar wasn't meant to insult me. It was meant to buy me time. It kept me out of the spotlight. It kept their lawyers off my back. It made them think I'd lost. And by the time I found the real inheritance, they were already drunk off their supposed victory, too busy counting their cut to realize he'd hidden something far more valuable where they'd never think to look. In his truth, in the letters, in the records, in the careful, quiet act of rewriting everything they tried to erase. And that final envelope in the safe, it confirmed it all. Inside was a certificate of ownership, a private investment account under my name, one that had been growing for years, one that wasn't tied to his estate or bound by the probate process. It had been funded slowly, quietly, deposits made through a third party, untraceable, unless you had the key. And I did. At the bottom of the file, a sticky note in his handwriting. Let them have the house. You get the legacy. And he was right. They could have the walls, the lawn, the lake view. But I had the story, the evidence, the truth of who he really was, messy, flawed, remorseful, and finally, brave enough to trust me with the parts of himself he couldn't show the world. That $1, it wasn't my inheritance. It was my invitation. I didn't open the investment account right away. It wasn't about the money, not anymore. It was about what it meant. That my father had been building something in silence, piece by piece, while the rest of the family looked the other way. But once I did log in, I couldn't breathe. 6 figures, not life-changing billionaire money. but enough to erase every doubt I'd ever had about whether he cared. Enough to build a new life, one that didn't depend on anyone's approval, anyone's permission, anyone's inheritance. The account had been structured under a trust he'd set up years ago. It wasn't in his will. It wasn't traceable through the estate. It had its own terms, designed to activate only if I accessed the storage unit and submitted the unique key ID included in the folder. It was like a secret vault, buried under layers of legal armor, and the name of the trust, JC Legacy Fund. My initials. That was the moment I cried. Not when I found the money, not when I found the letters, not when I opened the safe. It was when I saw my name, written not as an afterthought, but as a plan, a promise, a preservation of something they'd all tried to bury. He hadn't just left me something, he'd built something for me, outside of them. Outside of the narrative where I was always the difficult daughter, the outsider, the estranged one who chose to disappear. He knew they would twist the truth, so he left me the tools to protect it. And now I had options. I could go public, tell the story, let the world know what really happened. Or I could stay quiet, let them bask in their illusion of winning while I built something of my own, something far more valuable than square footage or sentimental heirlooms. But first, I wanted to see them again, one more time, because sometimes silence is the loudest form of truth. And I had one more move to make. I showed up to the celebration dinner, wearing a black dress and a soft smile. It was Diane's idea, naturally, a dinner to honor Dad's legacy, now that the estate had been officially settled. She framed it like a memorial, but we all knew what it really was, a victory lap. Thomas was already halfway through a bottle of Cabernet when I arrived. Eli looked uncomfortable in his blazer, like a kid who'd borrowed a grown-up's skin. Diane greeted me with her signature half-hug and a whisper, "Glad you could make it, Julia." I nodded. I wouldn't miss it. They didn't ask how I was, didn't mention the $1, didn't even pretend to be awkward about it, because in their minds, it was over. They'd won. They'd cleaned out the house, sold off the cars, started renovation plans on the lake cabin. I just smiled. Let them talk. Let them brag. I said things like, "It's nice that everything worked out. You all deserve it. He loved you so much." I said it the way Diane always did. Smooth, passive, just sweet enough to not sound sharp. And they ate it up. They had no idea I knew about the storage unit. No idea I had the letters. No idea I was sitting on a financial foundation my father had designed exclusively for me, because I played it exactly how he'd planned. Quiet, polite, forgettable. I toasted to him with cheap wine and hollow praise. I thanked them for including me, complimented the decor, laughed at Thomas's jokes, and then I excused myself, slipped out the back, and drove away without saying goodbye. Because I wasn't there for closure. I was there to watch them lie to themselves, to see, one last time, what it looks like when people win the wrong things. They got the house. I got the truth. They got the portrait over the fireplace. I got the words he couldn't say out loud. And more than anything, they got each other, which, to be honest, is probably the worst punishment of all. 2 weeks after the dinner, the for sale sign went up. Dad's house, the one I grew up in, listed online with glossy photos and an asking price high enough to make Diane beam with pride. She'd hired a staging company, stripped it of his personality, added trendy throw pillows and fake orchids. The listing said, "Lovingly maintained family home, ready for new memories." The irony nearly made me choke. I hadn't planned to interfere, but when the lawyer contacted me, not Mr. Halpern, but a younger associate now handling the tail end of the estate, he said something strange. "You're still listed on the property's original deed." I paused. "What?" "Your name was added jointly in 2006. It was part of a tax structuring move. Your father never removed it. It's not tied to the will. It predates the marriage." I didn't remember that. I was 16 at the time. It must have been one of those things he filed without telling me. A protection, a backup. And now, It gave me leverage, not to take the house, not to ruin the sale, but to make one last point. I filed a motion, not a lawsuit, just a claim of interest on the property. It legally paused the sale until ownership was clarified. Diane was livid. Thomas sent me a 3-paragraph text filled with barely disguised threats and spelling errors. Eli stayed quiet, always did. The lawyer called again. They want to settle privately, quietly. I agreed, but I didn't ask for the house. I asked for my cut, 50% of the sale, based on my standing on the original deed. They hesitated. They tried to negotiate, tried to throw in heirlooms, a car, even money from the cabin sale. I refused. Eventually, they gave in, because the longer they fought, the more public it would become. And the one thing Diane hated more than me, scandal. When the deal closed, I received a direct deposit large enough to silence 3 generations of family gaslighting. And in the memo line, final distribution, I stared at it on my banking app, then took a screenshot, not to show anyone else, just to remind myself. They erased me from the will, but they couldn't erase what was already mine. It wasn't planned. I didn't rehearse what I was going to say or practice some dramatic exit line in the mirror. I just found myself in the grocery store parking lot, keys in one hand, when I saw Eli walking toward me. We hadn't spoken since the will reading. He looked older than I remembered, tired, like someone who'd been carrying too many secrets for too long. When he saw me, he stopped. "Julia," he said quietly. "Got a second?" I hesitated, then nodded. We stood there in the shade of a sad little tree, 2 adults with too much unsaid between them. He rubbed the back of his neck, the same nervous tic he had when we were kids, and he broke Mom's ceramic bowl. I didn't know," he said. "Didn't know what?" "That he left you the unit, the account, any of it." I raised an eyebrow. "But you knew about the dollar." He looked down. "I did." "And you said nothing." He nodded slowly. There it was. Not rage, not even betrayal, just confirmation. They all knew. They sat there, watched it happen, and stayed quiet. "I wanted to say something," he murmured, "at the reading, but Diane said it would complicate things. Said it was his decision and we had to respect it." "And you believed her?" I didn't know what to believe. I stared at him. "You know what hurts more than what he did?" I asked. He shook his head. "The silence, the way you all let it happen like it was normal, like it was deserved, like I hadn't spent half my life trying to earn a place back in a family that decided I didn't fit." Eli swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." And I believed him. Not because it made things okay, not because an apology undoes years of being erased, but because for the first time, someone looked me in the eye and acknowledged the truth. "You didn't deserve that," he added. "You never did." I nodded, then turned to leave. But just before I reached my car, I looked back. "You want to do something that matters?" I said. "Next time someone gets pushed out, say something. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it costs you." He didn't reply, but I could tell. He heard me. The flash drive sat on my desk for weeks. I'd found it in the storage unit, labeled simply, JC, read me. At first, I thought it might be documents, maybe financial backups, or scanned letters. But when I finally opened the folder, there was only one file, a video, titled, "For Julia." My heart nearly stopped. I didn't press play right away. I just stared at the screen, like it might vanish if I blinked. And then, I clicked. The frame opened with a bit of static, then settled into the familiar image of my father. Older, thinner, sitting at a desk with a yellow desk lamp and a stack of paper to the side. His hands were folded, but he didn't look nervous. He looked tired. He took a deep breath before speaking. "If you're watching this, then you found what I left you, which means I didn't completely fail." He laughed, softly, bitterly. "I've spent most of my life running from things I didn't know how to fix, and the biggest thing I ran from was you." I leaned in closer. "You were always stronger than me, Julia. You wanted answers. You asked questions. You challenged what didn't make sense. And I didn't know how to love that version of you. Not after losing your mom." His eyes dropped for a second. Diane filled the silence I didn't know how to sit with, and in doing that, I let her rewrite the story, including the part where you mattered. I didn't fight hard enough. I didn't speak up when I should have. And by the time I realized what I'd done, you were gone, and I was too much of a coward to ask you back. He cleared his throat. That $1, it was a trick, a legal wall to keep them out, so they'd never look where I needed you to go. You weren't an afterthought. You were the only one I trusted with the truth. Everything else, the storage unit, the account, the letters, that's my apology. Too late, but real. He paused, looked straight into the camera. You didn't deserve the silence. You didn't deserve the blame. You didn't deserve to feel unloved. But you do deserve what I left behind. Because it's not just money. It's proof that someone saw you, that someone believed in who you were becoming. He blinked hard, once. I hope one day you can forgive me. But if you can't, I understand. The screen faded to black. No goodbye. No dramatic music. Just silence. But this time, it didn't hurt. Because in those few quiet minutes, I heard more love than he'd shown me in the last 20 years. And that was enough. After the video, something shifted. Not just in how I saw him, but in how I saw myself. For so long, I'd been carrying around this invisible weight. The question that ate at me like rust. Why wasn't I enough? But maybe I was never the problem. Maybe the story I'd been handed, the one where I was the outsider, the difficult one, the daughter who disappeared, wasn't the truth. Maybe it was just a version told by people who needed me to be small so they could feel big. And now, with every document, every letter, every encrypted file tucked away in that storage unit, I had the chance to write a different version, my version. So I did. I took the letters, the legal papers, the video, and I created something new. A personal memoir, not for profit, not for vengeance. Just a quiet, truthful account, titled, The Daughter He Didn't Forget. I printed one copy, left it in a sealed envelope at my father's headstone. I don't know why. Maybe it was for him, maybe it was for me. I also wrote a letter to Mr. Halpern, the estate attorney, attaching scanned pages from the file marked Correspondence Legal Objections, Diane. No threats, no legal action. Just a note that read, in case they ever try to rewrite history again, know that I still have the original draft. I didn't hear back, didn't expect to, because it wasn't about them anymore. It was about me reclaiming my place, not in their inheritance, but in the truth. My father may have failed in 1,000 ways, but in the end, he did something brave. He gave me the truth in a way no one could steal. He made sure my story couldn't be erased. Not by lawyers, not by stepmothers, not by silence. And that truth, it became the legacy. Not the house, not the cars, not the trust funds, but the proof that even the people who fail us the most can still try to make it right. If only we're willing to look for the buried parts they were too broken to give in life. I kept the dollar. I didn't frame it, didn't burn it, didn't throw it in some drawer to gather dust. I carried it, folded neatly in the inner pocket of my wallet. The place most people keep emergency cash or forgotten receipts. Because that dollar, it opened a door, not just to a storage unit or an investment account or a rewritten legacy, but to me. It forced me to look at everything I thought I understood about my father, my family, and myself, and ask, what if they were wrong about me? What if I wasn't the problem? What if walking away wasn't abandonment, but survival? What if not fitting into their version of family wasn't failure, but freedom? That $1, the thing that was supposed to be a slap in the face, ended up being the key to everything they tried to keep locked away. It gave me reason to question. It led me to the letters, the video, the hidden truth that dismantled years of shame. And maybe that was the point. Maybe my father knew the only way I'd ever believe in his love again was to find it myself, not through words, not through inheritance, but through discovery. And now, every time I open my wallet and see that thin slip of green paper, I don't feel small. I feel powerful. Because it reminds me of who I've become. A woman who can face the truth, no matter how painful. A daughter who didn't settle for erasure. A person who rewrote the ending of her own story. With clarity, with dignity, and with no need for anyone's permission. So yes, my inheritance was $1, but it bought me everything. Sometimes people ask me, if you could go back, would you want more? More money? More stuff? A bigger piece of the estate? And the answer, number, because what I got was worth more than any check they could have written. I got the truth. I got clarity. I got myself back. I am grateful, but not for the dollar. I'm grateful for the path it led me down. For the moment, it forced me to stop swallowing the version of my life that others fed me. For the day I realized that being cut out didn't mean I wasn't worthy. It meant I wasn't for sale. I'm grateful I went to the will reading, even when I knew it would hurt. I'm grateful I opened that envelope in my car, even when my hands were shaking. I'm grateful I didn't walk away when I found that key in the box, or the letters in the attic, or the truth in a dusty storage unit. Because every time I chose to keep digging, I wasn't just uncovering secrets, I was uncovering myself. The daughter who deserved better, the woman who found power in her own voice, the version of me that my father, despite all his flaws, finally believed in. Even if too late, I don't tell this story for pity. I don't tell it for revenge. I tell it because somewhere, someone else got handed their own metaphorical dollar. And they're wondering if that's all they're worth. Let me tell you something. You are not what they gave you. You are what you do with it. I took their $1 insult and turned it into a full circle reckoning. Not with vengeance, but with grace. Not to tear them down, but to rebuild myself. And if that's not wealth, I don't know what is. So yeah, I was left $1, and today I carry it like a badge, not because it defines me, but because it reminds me, even the smallest inheritance can open the biggest doors if you're brave enough to walk through them.